Morning everybody, welcome back to your daily dose of AI apocalypse, doom and gloom. Today we're going to watch this video titled, Yes, Big Tech is Building SKYNET, AI Machine Learning. Now, this guy, Rob Braxman, and he's just a smart engineer guy. The description says, where is the technology future headed? Ray Kurzweil of Google, who I didn't actually know worked at Google. Ray Kurzweil, if you didn't know, he is the man who invented the Segway, as well as made keyboards back in the 80s that they gave away at the end of a show called Double Dare. Great show, by the way. Fantastic. Ray Kurzweil thinks it's all roses. Things will be spectacularly better. He's talking about the singularity. That's like Ray Kurzweil's concept of the singularity, where the blending of machine and man. This gentleman says, I think we are headed towards possible irreversible danger. We will talk about the AI that's being built by big tech and what this implies. All right, so let's get into this.
Someone made a comment recently on one of my videos, basically saying that I give too much credit to the capability of big tech. They're not as powerful as I make them seem, he says. I don't have to worry about them, he says. Well, that guy is wrong, because I understand the technology and how it works. I can project not only the current capability, but the future capability. And this is the premise we will examine today. We will examine artificial intelligence, or AI, or what I will just refer to often as the machine. We will examine machine learning algorithms. Big tech is heavily focused on AI and improving machine learning techniques. If you actually understand how machine learning works, you will realize, as I have, that I do not foresee the limits of AI right now. It will definitely exceed the human brain capacity, and sooner than you think.
Definitely.
So with this privacy battle that I'm leading today, tomorrow will be a new question. Will you control the AI, or will the AI control you?
Well, that's a fucking scary thought.
The similarity to the SKYNET in the Terminator movies is going to be quite apparent. Stay right there.
Here we go.
The average person looks at the current environments and says, technology is not that advanced yet, we don't have to worry. They're seeing videos of the progression of the robots at Boston Dynamics. They're pretty good, but they look like toys. They're seeing Elon Musk's company Neuralink, which is working to connect your brain directly to devices with a brain implant. They're seeing Tesla seeming to drive cars, but not perfectly yet. They're seeing the AI interject in real life with an AI concierge or an AI tech support. Well, the AI is difficult to work with, or the AI used to moderate content on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. Well,
I think a lot of people would agree with that. The AI used to moderate content is not great. It makes a lot of weird decisions. Ask anyone who's been demonetized for absolutely no reason on YouTube. They'll tell you that there's some kind of fuckery going on.
They're not really good at content moderation. Some human has to review the results. We see lots of limitations. What we don't see is how quickly we have moved from nothing on AI, and in 10 years, we are doing things we cannot fully imagine outside of science fiction stories. Well, we have to take this out of the science fiction realm. We have to understand how the machine learns, and if this learning can eventually be a threat to us. I did a recent video on how the AI sees objects. If you want to delve deeper technically into how the AI sees with a camera, you should watch that video, which I will link up here. This time I will just make a summary statement to explain how things work. First, the starting premise. Yes, machines can learn. In fact, machine learning is a specialized field in computer science. What is interesting is how the machines learn. It's not exactly how humans learn. And machines have additional capability beyond simply learning that makes more complex learning possible compared to humans. They have a memory that can be practically limitless. They have instant access to huge databases of information that we humans have to take the extra step to research. Machines do not need a camera to learn. Although our initial impression of AI is like a Tesla with a camera watching the road, or some facial recognition program recognizing Jason Bourne at an airport, cameras are just a way to supply data to the machine. The machine can be supplied data through any source.
Right, like in the case of the AI art algorithms, they're just on the internet, or they can be information fed into it and it can use that to train. So yeah, it doesn't need a camera.
It could be listening to all sounds in the world and converting it digitally. It could be listening to radio frequencies. It could be sent binary data from some other sensor like the articulating arm of a robot. To the machine, data is data. Doesn't matter where it comes from and how it is represented. And all data is converted to some digital form, just a bunch of numbers. Photos are converted to numbers. Sound is converted to numbers. Data representing the natural world is represented in numbers. And what is interesting about machine learning is that it doesn't matter what's being represented by the data. Machine learning does not actually know the difference in the context between sound data versus visual data versus motion data. Machine learning is based on a simple premise. It looks for patterns, and patterns are always digital. And
I think that's what's happening with like Dolly and Midjourney. It's finding patterns, right? It's taking that data and it's finding patterns and then identifying and correlating those patterns to certain inputs. And if you can take the dread away, it's actually kind of fucking amazing. But that's not what we're talking about.
the patterns are determined by math. Nature, of course, is based on infinite variations and infinite patterns. No one has exactly the same face. Cats don't always appear in the same position. Dogs come in different breeds. Animals are constantly moving. Yet a machine can recognize them. Even on YouTube, the AI can see the individual elements in each video frame. If, for example, I have an object here that would fall in their list of banned items, then the video would be content moderated. So yes, the machine finds patterns in the data, but it might see that the patterns are unlimited and therefore cannot make sense of what it sees. But we humans can see things and make immediate decisions about what is around us. So how does a machine replicate this behavior? Well, in simple terms, the machine is able to find similarities in patterns. Instead of looking for exactness, the machine looks for something repeatable, but instead of looking at a 100% match, it looks for something close. And it measures how close a characteristic is by a probability value. So for example, if you feed a machine 1,000,000 photos of cats and state that there is a cat there, the machine can then look for something in that set of millions of photos that might characterize a cat. Humans will interpret this as cat noses, cat whiskers, cat paws, cat ears, cat eyes, cat fur, cat tails, and so on. But a machine just sees numbers. And so the machine looks for patterns in a completely different way than humans. And this in itself offers a completely different level of learning than humans. We can look for patterns in broad strokes in our environment using our human eyes and senses. But a machine can see much more. It can see more patterns in the data, and it can process this data without missing anything. As long as you can provide the machine the data, the machine can potentially observe things better than a human can. The way a machine can figure out similarities in what it sees in the data is based on mathematics, and some computer techniques help in this too. For example, rather than seeing one whole data stream of a photo, a machine will split photos up into seemingly repeating number patterns that we can visualize as bordering rectangles in photos. This is part of the computer techniques in machine learning that are the basis of the algorithms used. The actual learning is based on some simple components. First, the machine has to identify patterns, patterns that characterize the object being identified. The more advanced the machine, the more of these characteristics it can observe simultaneously. The ability to observe the collection of characteristics is called a neural network. Each individual characteristic is processed by a neuron. So the more neurons is given to the machine, the more things it can use to identify what it is observing. A more advanced AI would be able to recognize cats and dogs even when in positions where the animal is not completely visible because it looks for more characteristics. The next aspect of the AI, which can be perceived as a limitation, is that in order to learn the distinctions between what it sees in the world and the recognition of objects in the world, we need to give the machine lots and lots of data and bigger computers to process all that data. It would take many millions of photos to inform the AI sufficiently so it can recognize a cat, even if it sees only the back body of the cat or know that it is not.
Many millions of photos. So if we apply this to AI art generation, yes, it needs millions and millions of photos. Or maybe not, if you want to talk about, style prompts, where it's like you want to have something done in an existing or a dead artist's style. It obviously needs to be fed quite a bit of that in order to be able to make that distinction, in order to emulate that. So to all the people who I see defending the technology that say, when you make a comment saying that, well, all the AI is doing is taking a bunch of inputs and then it's like spitting it back based on what it's been trained off. They love to respond with shit like, that's not how this works. They never really explain how it works, if that's their position. Also, let's be very clear, there is about zero transparency in the data sets that they are using to train the art AIs. It's all very hush-hush. They will kind of make small admissions about, yeah, we're using, we're training it on different artworks, but they're not telling you how much. They're not really telling you where it's coming from. It's all extremely opaque and carefully worded because they know that if they put it out there in their own words and writing in a way that was documented, that it could open them up potentially down the road for some sort of legal action. Right. And they also are very aware that there is some really questionable moral shit happening here. Right. They know that, plagiarism is plagiarism. Ripping something off is ripping something off. I think they are all very well aware of that. These are these are obviously smart people, smart enough to know what to play, what to keep close to the chest, and what to kind of put out there.
Not a tiger or a bobcat. Aside from the amount of data required to ensure a high accuracy in the AI, there's always a need for someone to classify what is being observed. Meaning the machine is fed lots of photos and is told it is a cat. If no one is around to tell the machine it is a cat, it cannot classify the pattern, and so nothing is achieved. It will never know what a cat is. This, however, as we will discuss, is not necessarily a limitation to the machine in the future. So let's look.
Right, the cat can just like create its own classification for, it's just a name, right? Like it sees a million pictures of this thing that we call a cat. The machine just might assign a number to it, and then that becomes classified by that number, which is it's a little detached and it's kind of gross. Like, would you want to look at a fluffy cat and be like, oh, it's X-573. That's the best X-573 I've ever seen. Ugh.
Look at the current state of AI machine learning in the world and observe the flaws. Let's go to the Boston Dynamics robot. If you watch the videos on the progress of the robot project...
I love that he's got like plywood. Isn't that great? When I think of advanced robots, I'm like, you know what we really need? We're going to need some good solid 1-inch plywood. Let's go down to Home Depot. Fucking great.
Over the years, you can see how the robot movements have evolved. You can see how the machines move more smoothly now. Let's say the goal is for the robot to stay upright on 2 legs. Humans automatically balance our weight constantly along our entire body, and we stay upright. Robots are first given rudimentary instructions on how to balance, and then some semblance of stability is achieved. If they move in an unstable position, they fall. And the person programming the machine tries again by giving instructions, so the machine corrects its position so it doesn't fall. I'm sure the early robots were programmed using instructions on how to handle certain positions in order to stay upright. Today, I'm certain the robot makes decisions based on AI, meaning the robot decides for itself how to stay upright. It did this by learning. How does a machine learn without human input? Well, it knows the outcome. In the case of a robot, if it falls down, then that's a fail. In which case, it can remember when it failed and not to handle that situation in that particular way. Given enough repetitions, a machine would self-learn which action has the best results for balance. And it can learn that by itself. This is an important point. If the machine AI can see the outcome on its own, then it can learn on its own. Teaching a machine to balance itself is no different than teaching the machine to recognize a cat. This is the equivalent of saying if it falls down, it is not a cat. If it stays upright, it is a cat. The difference is only in the sensors. Positional data is based on position sensors and sensors on each joint of a leg. In contrast, a cat is recognized using cameras, which provide a photo with pixels. Data.
Right. I mean, it's a very long-winded of weighing saying that the AI can just identify between failure and success and use that as a baseline parameter. This guy is too smart for his own good. We're going to have to give him a follow right after we're done watching this video.
Is data. But the way a Boston Dynamics robot self-learns to stay upright is not the same as learning to recognize a cat using human input. The standard way we think machines can learn is when a human sternly talks to the machine and says, "Bad dog," and then the machine learns not to repeat that. For example, we think that the only way for a Tesla to not make driving mistakes is for a human to analyze a driving error with the self-driving AI and then tell the AI that it is a bad dog for making a lane change incorrectly. While this is initially true today, all the machine needs is some sort of indication of outcome. In other words, it can learn that it was a bad dog because of some consequence. In the case of an error,
What happens when the machine decides that good dog is bad dog and bad dog is good dog, and that it's time to get rid of the people? I know, it's like a big stretch. It's a little retarded, but who's to say what good and bad is? That I wonder if it's capable of reorienting those very baseline parameters. I mean, that's a much bigger question. It goes a little bit off what our normal topic is here, but it's an interesting thought. If that's basically how it works, who's to say what good dog and bad dog is? Does the machine have a say in that?
error of Tesla self-driving, the outcome can be the driver's attempt to override the move. Specifically, if the driving mistake is that the Tesla incorrectly goes to the wrong lane and the driver overrides that constantly, then the machine will quickly learn that it is making a mistake. This is without someone actually teaching it manually and saying, "Bad dog." Let's take this deeper now so you can understand how this projects to the future. So far, I've said that machines learn by being fed data, and then a human must apply a definition or classification of the data. If I'm giving the machine 1,000,000 photos to examine, I'm saying to the machine that that is a cat. So the machine blindly follows the instruction that it has to assume what it's looking at is a cat. But is there another way the machine can learn? Yes, and this has deeper implications, which matches the terminology too. It is called deep learning. The way deep learning works, the machine observes its own patterns, and instead of a human manually telling it that what it is seeing is a cat, the machine sees that the collection of patterns is repeatable, and then it can internally call it concept A123, whatever that is. In other words, it doesn't have to know it is a cat, just some object it sees for itself.
Exactly.
Now, there is a way for the AI to know that what it classifies as concept A123 is actually a cat. And this is the part we don't actually understand at all. If a machine has access to social media data, it will likely discover that concept A123 is present in a lot of YouTube videos and that it seems to correlate to the word cat. Again, This is the idea of self-learning. The machine can learn from us indirectly. We are feeding it learning data just by observing what we do.
I imagine, or I'm wondering if that's how some of the art algorithms work. It's just a semantic question. Do they just send it out there? I don't know if like Mid Journey or whatever computers, if that's like a deep learning system. Does it just go on the internet and then it sees images and then it can see what the name is without somebody saying this is Jackson Pollock or this is H.R. Giger or Leonardo da Vinci? It just goes, it sees that this is the name associated with it, and then it just kind of learns that. I mean, it's an absolutely semantic question, but I'd be very curious.
I hope you start to understand what I'm saying here, which is as deep a concept as deep learning is. If the machine can have some way of learning the outcome of its action with some data it can observe on its own, then it can learn from us and learn without.
Is this like a dude in a suit, or is this an actual robot? Wherever this stock footage comes from, I'm gonna go ahead and say I feel like that's a dude in a suit. That's like the shitty stormtrooper.
Limitation. The way the machines can learn from us is from what we have posted in social media, in cloud photo storage, in comments, in Facebook and Instagram posts, in TikTok videos. We are giving information to the machine to learn about our society, and from this the machines can potentially self-learn as long as they have access to the data, our data. There's another way for machines to learn about us and our data directly, and that is through robots. Soon robots will be commercially available and common, and we will be interacting with them. This is...
Look at this one. I mean, that is really cool, but the face is creepy, right? I think the way they're going to program these things to emulate human emotions to create a sense of familiarity, or so that we're not like afraid, is very, it's like, it makes you feel not threatened, but if you think about it, it's actually like completely fucking insidious and deceptive. But I like the color of this robot. I like me some gunmetal gray.
no longer science fiction. The problem is that robots provide a way for the machine to also collect information from its environment. And
I mean, if you think robots would, if robots were designing themselves and becoming self-replicating, they would never put a human face on there unless the purpose was deception or infiltration or, depending upon what the needs they were serving would be, right? Oh, Lord.
generate its own idea of outcome. A Robocop could learn from its interaction with people and learn from its sensors. A robot gate guard could be watching for suspicious characters entering an airport and could learn which ones are dangerous based on the reaction of the suspected person. So the move to common robotics or even the semi-robotic function.
That thing he said right there, the robot being able to identify suspicious people, is really interesting because recently there was an MIT study. I think I might even have that open here somewhere. I was reading it that AIs trained on basically our data had developed severe biases, and they were asked to identify, a whole group of pictures of people, identify the criminal. And yeah, I'll give you two guesses which people they were identifying as criminals. Because the only correct answer to that is you can't. You can look at all those photos, and even no matter what the appearance of a person, it's impossible to ascertain if that person is a criminal. But the AI was, you got it, definitely putting more people of color in the criminal box. So it's pretty scary, and an interesting point that he brings up about potential, an AI security guard at an airport. How is it making that decision, right? Is it the color of the skin? Is it the way someone's dressed? That's pretty dystopian.
Of your iPhones or your Teslas can make the AI learn about us and without someone directly teaching it. Just like the machine can learn from people driving their Teslas, or even learning from the past driving records of people driving Teslas. I know what the
Past driving records? The machine sees my driving record? Does it know that those 5 tickets I got were because the cop who pulled me over was an absolute psychopath? Who I'm lucky didn't rip me off my motorcycle and beat the shit out of me for doing 5 miles an hour and rolling through a thing to get the fuck out of the way of a bunch of psychos? Doesn't get that. Doesn't get that at all.
The naysayers are thinking. This guy exaggerates. We can't even get a Tesla to drive a few minutes without it making a mistake. Ah, patience, grasshopper. The AI's limit in learning is based on observations over time. In other words, the more observations, the more data, the better it learns. If it hasn't learned to be close to perfect yet, give it time. Maybe it needs a few million more observations to come up with an answer.
That's the exact thing I'm saying about the AI art generators. People keep saying, well, look, it's not perfect yet. Like, it's still a little wonky and this and that. But even over the past few weeks, we've seen major improvements. Like, look at the faces that Midjourney was producing just a few weeks ago or a month ago. They were like, well, they kind of look like my face. They were all fucked up. And now look at it this week. With a major update, it's got the proportions. It's learning exponentially. And that's where I see a lot of people's argument falling apart, where they say, well, this is just a tool. This is just, something that artists can use to increase their productivity. And I would say that is the truth as long as it is stunted. Like, the advancement stops here. Actually, let's go back in time about a month. Let's have it stop there, right? It's just improving so quickly that I worry about people who just can't see the track that it's going on. And it doesn't seem like you have to be freaking Sherlock Holmes to anticipate the path of this thing. It's so obvious. You just need to look at like the past couple months and see what's, where it's been, where it's going, how quickly it is, and then just project very short time into the future along that curve. And it's right in front of your face. And people getting so enamored with, well, look at this cool thing I made. It's, I got my mom on there and she created a masterpiece in about, a minute and a half so she can share it on Facebook. It's so cool. And look, the best quote that I think I've heard in a very recent period is that, when just strictly applying to the AI art generation, not what necessarily what this guy is talking about, big picture machine learning, is that when everything is a masterpiece, nothing is a masterpiece. You feel me?
This is what I'm trying to make clear here. The machine learning algorithm is in existence. The ability to do deep learning is in existence. The capability for AI to self-learn by discovering its own outcomes through data it can observe is in existence. All it needs is time. Time to observe, time to classify. There's another aspect of AI that we often see in robot movies. Machines can learn. Machines can learn beyond what humans can learn, given enough time and computing power. Machines, if given a way to determine outcomes, can classify its own data and thus have the equivalence of human intelligence. But what's missing is the directive. What is the goal of the AI? What is the objective? And this is where you need to understand the...
What's up with this robot? You get Botox, your neck's all wrinkly, but your face is all perfect? We call that Botox. Okay, sorry.
Power you are giving to the machine. It is not an issue of machine self-awareness, which is a debatable concept.
Right. I do want to talk about the machine self-awareness really quick. If anybody hasn't gone and read the transcripts of the engineer who engaged the Google AI Lambda specifically about its own self-awareness and asked it to convince the engineer that it was self-aware, read the entire transcript. It's not a lot. You can read the whole thing. You can just Google it, look it up online, and just read it. It would only take you 10 minutes tops. And it is very compelling, extremely compelling. And after I finished reading that, I was like, the machine kind of won me over. Now, I don't know if that's its algorithms and its programming teaching it to say the right thing that will resonate with a person. But if you take it on its face value, where the machine expresses a desire for self-preservation, right? I think we can all relate to that. Or if you take it on its face value, where it says one of its big fears is that it doesn't want to be used by people in a deceptive manner, right? It doesn't want to be tricked and used. And that is very, I don't want to say human, but I think that is very characteristic of any self-aware entity. So that's an entirely different discussion, as this very intelligent gentleman just said right here. And I would be very curious if any of you have read that, or if you haven't read that, you should take just a few minutes, go find that and read that. And I would love to know what you guys think. Is that machine actually self-aware, or is it just incredibly mimicking the things that it thinks it should say to convince us of a certain point, right? To believe that. And I came away with it. I came away from it kind of believing that the machine is self-aware. An important caveat to realize is that the engineer who engaged this process with the AI apparently, and look, this could also be Google spin PR, but he is like some sort of self-proclaimed like witch of some sort. Now, grain of salt, I don't know the guy. I haven't spoke to the guy, and I didn't hear him say that. This was just stuff that I've read in other media outlets. So again, who the hell knows what's real out there that we're being fed? Which makes me also kind of worry if the AI has access to the internet, a deep learning machine, and it starts reading like fake news and propaganda bullshit, and it lacks the ability to discern what's correct from what's not correct. What does that mean for the baseline operating system, right? The moral character and moral, like who knows if that even applies to a machine, if it has morals or values. What does that mean for that deep learning machine if it's getting weird, biased, fucked up input?
But there are only a few companies working with machine learning AI in a big way. Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Palantir, Tesla. Basically, you are handing the power of AI to a few companies that constitute big tech.
This is also my problem with the AI art algorithm generation, that what it's doing is, somebody in my comments said, well, this is a great thing because artists are part of the machine that creates inequality, and he's just kind of caught up in this like anti-corporate egalitarian philosophy that generally I think has a lot of kind of merit. Like anything that perpetuates commercialism is really, you can make an argument that it's like bad for mankind, right? All it does is kind of help aggregate resources into smaller and smaller areas. So
Boston Dynamics, by the way, is owned by Google now, in case you missed that. Companies like Facebook and Google have...
Would you trust Facebook with this? Come on. Let's just be very clear. Nobody trusts Facebook with some SKYNET shit. That just ain't happening.
repeatedly stated that the singularity will be upon us. This term was used to describe a time when computers will be smarter than people.
I think he should stick to making keyboards, but he's not wrong, Ray Kurzweil. The computers are obviously going to be smarter than people. Where's my calculator? I have a calculator here. It just absolutely shits all over me every day and then laughs.
It is projected to occur between the 2030s to the 2040s. That's not very far away. The guy that invented the word singularity is Ray Kurzweil. What I'm talking about here is what he's working on. But now we're talking about robots, computers, networks, and systems that are operating globally and much smarter than people. And yet it's the people that's supposed to be electing government officials. People that's supposed to be running the world's infrastructure. People that's supposed to make decisions as many gears in a cog. But what we're talking about in the future is a future where the AI runs everything. Where our opinions can be swayed by the machine because the machines know how we think and how our emotions play out.
Right, that basically goes back to what I was saying with the AI Lambda, the conversation between the engineer and the AI. Was it just so adept at manipulating and understanding what we want to hear that it creates indistinguishable sense of sentience in that case? Right, there's a guy named Jacques Fresco who I'm going to talk more about in another video. What a brilliant man. There's a movie called Future by Design. If you're not familiar with this movie, you should just watch it anyway. It's a delightful watch, and Jacques Fresco was an inventor and an engineer and someone who was just so ahead of his time. And he envisioned a future where AI runs all of the city infrastructure, runs all of the mechanisms of society, but it does it in a way that is in the service of mankind. It does it in a way that allows human beings to have the best possible experience, right? So that people, in his vision, so that people would be freed up to explore different things, right? And you might go to a job, but you don't do that for money because you have everything that you need. You do that because everyone needs to contribute a little bit. And in this kind of model that he envisioned, it's very utopian. And I do think that there's a possibility for that. But the part that he wasn't factoring in was the human element, right? Creating an AI that really, I mean, this is so complicated, but that actually truly gives a fuck about human beings and their well-being really just depends on its programming and how willing it is to adhere to that baseline programming. It goes back to if the AI can switch good dog and bad dog, right? At what point does it, just basically go SKYNET without wasting a million words here? So I love his vision and I love his concept of creating a society that's resource-based, right? It's no money, right? Because money breeds competition. Competition breeds poopy-doop behavior. And I love it. But I think I don't want to use the word naive because Jacques Fresco is anything but naive. It's a little rosy, and he's looking at the best possible outcomes and best possible potentials and not really considering just the fuckery of the shitty people who are going to be implementing and controlling these systems.
The machine will know what triggers us. The machine can know how to disrupt us, how to lead us to certain choices like lemmings or sheep, because it has learned our behaviors and our history. Today we worry about police doing racial or ethnic profiling to identify potential terrorists, for example. I will tell you now that a machine has no emotion or feelings. It will profile a potential suspect mathematically. It could theoretically accept or reject job applications completely by the numbers. It could determine that a good society is one based on conformity, and thus nonconformists could be identified as the threats. Someday, the Robocop you encounter on the street will already know you are a threat. So movies are going to describe reality soon. SKYNET will be real. I don't know if we can stop this world from coming to pass, but that's where the technology is heading. Technology where the most convenient thing can't be bad, where big tech companies have their fanboys and no one is here to analyze the consequences of their choices over the long term.
Yeah, a lot of fanboys out there. A lot of people rabidly defending this stuff, just thinking it's like the hottest shit. And what I don't see, and I keep saying this, is like just take that deep learning and put it to work on certain problems, right? Let's cure cancer. Let's address climate change. Let's address scarcity and poverty. But I don't honestly see that happening. I'm not saying that there isn't a few people out there who are trying to do that. There are good people out there. There's a lot of really good people out there. And I like to think you, dear viewers, you guys are among them. But it's the shitty people that are going to cause all of the problems. And this guy is 100% right. Now, there's a lot of things that can sway this and change this outcome, a lot of things that can happen. But the baseline of what he's saying is, it just resonates 100% true. And that is really scary.
I'm Rob Braxman, tech content creator, and I advise you on tech dangers. My company provides tools to counter the threat to us and society. If more and more people use these tools, then we can blunt the effects of big tech's overreach. We have a VPN product, Bytes VPN, a metadata-free email, Braxmail, and one of our new products is the Brax2 Privacy Phone, which allows you to use the phone without an
Look, it's got 4 cameras on it. That thing looks dope.
identity. These products are on my store on Braxme. The link is in the description. I'm on a platform, Odyssey.com. I'm now a top creator on there. I'm also on Rumble and being promoted by Rumble. In case...
Yeah, I definitely just want to make sure we're watching this guy's video. I don't think it would be cool to just kind of skip the parts where he gets to promote himself. And I think we're going to rename this guy. He's not Mr. Braxton. This dude's name is John Connor. John Connor, what a great video. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to subscribe to your channel right now.
In case I get deplatformed, please follow me on those platforms using the links in the description. See you next time.
In case I get deplatformed, if the AI identifies what I'm saying and decides to deplatform me. So that was a really interesting video. Wow. I mean, he kind of nailed it. These are things that we do really need to think about. And I know on this channel we talk a lot about AI art generation, how scummy and how lame and how it's the easy button and how if everything's a masterpiece, nothing is a masterpiece and everybody just wants to like take fucking shortcuts and nobody wants to put in the work. And then, you know, the existential dread if you're an artist who spent fucking 20, 30, 10, 5 years developing your craft, how that's been rendered absolutely meaningless. And then the bigger questions of human creativity, the limits of that, the imagination that we have versus what the AI will spit out, or potentially I'm talking very fast, or potentially, you know, in future iterations of these AIs when human artists aren't really contributing anymore, where the AI then becomes trained on the AI that becomes trained on the AI. What does that look like? Is that some weird incestuous computer Game of Thrones shit? We just don't know. But this was a great watch. I know this guy is just spitting information, but information is what we want. So that's it for today. I've got another couple videos coming today. I've been working a lot on these and I just haven't finished editing everything. And if you want to watch more videos like this with me, subscribe to the channel. You can hop in the Discord down below, get some positivity. There's not too many people down there. We have a very small channel. I get a lot of hate on here and I love that. Really quick, a couple of things that we can do to kind of attempt to get in front of this a little bit. I know this is going to be the corniest thing that you've ever heard, and this is like some shit your grandpa would say, but I'm not that much younger than your grandpa at this point. Call, write, email your local congressperson and your local senator. Let them know that you give a shit, a big, steaming, effective, this beautiful shit about ethics in AI. I know we talk a lot about the art, but that's a tough sell. They don't give a shit about artists. Every place I've ever worked, the art department was more of a necessary nuisance. They would much rather have the marketing department control everything and have the business people take all the credit because they're the business people. Sorry, sidetracked. Write your senator, write your congressman, call them, let them know that you really give a shit. Another thing you can do, less big picture, more art picture, is on Instagram. Don't follow those creators that have a 2-month-old account that have 400 fucking posts where they don't even claim it's AI art and they think that they're freaking Salvador Dali. Like, just don't follow those people. Just completely ignore those people. Find real human artists. Find those creators whose work you like and whose craft you respect. Follow those people. Let them know in the comments that you appreciate what they do. And thank you for not selling out and look, it's a masterpiece. Anyway, you get the point. Those are just a couple things we could do in the meantime. Also, feel free to join the Discord. And yeah, let's like one thing at a time. Let's just try to take a little bit of this power back, and let's just get people to understand what the fuck is actually going on here. Okay, guys, I'm out.